call the meeting to order at 7:04. First on the agenda is minutes from June 10th. And we were all there, so we're good on that. Is there any recommended changes or modifications to it? Everyone's reviewed it? Okay. Unanimous consent? Yep. Another thing we have two new items on the agenda, one of which that were not warned previously, one of which is the organizational matters that we have to do annually. The other is the rehearing for the draft energy plan, which will be coming up later on in the meeting. So at this point, we're going to do the annual organizational matters, which would include, I guess, reappointments to positions.
Yeah, and adoption of the rules.
Right.
What does that mean exactly?
So I'm the
So there's a
chair,
chair
and we have
and
the vice chair, which actually we don't have, because Todd was the vice chair, I thought.
Yeah.
So.
Tina took this.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think we need to review.
And then we also have our rules of procedure, which were emailed out, that are no change, I would assume.
Just the date.
So we're adopting those rules of procedure with meetings and election of officers and other kind of related things. So that's all we're doing. So what we have to do is if someone wants to be the chair, we can nominate them. I'll be happy to stay as chair.
Okay, so would one of you like to nominate?
I will nominate Greg to be the chair.
Yeah, second it, I think.
I second it.
Okay, and we'll vote on it. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And then we need a vice chair, and I guess Tina has volunteered to do that previously, so since
Did
she's.
she? I
Sounds
have
like-
some recollection, but I don't really know that. But she's not here, so you could nominate.
Well, yeah, I think that her attendance is
Okay.
pretty good, so I think I would like to nominate Tina Cutler as the vice chair
Okay, I can second.
and snack committee member here. So seconded by Anna.
I'll vote for it.
And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And then the final item will be development.
Well, no, you need one more. Look at the rules. You have secretary that you also need to nominate.
Chair, vice chair, or secretary. Sure.
Or secretary?
It says, the planning commission shall elect by a vote of the majority a chair, vice chair, and secretary at the first meeting of
Yeah,
the
so
year.
you need a secretary
Yeah.
too.
The planning commission may elect a new chair, vice chair, or secretary at any point of the year, in the year.
I nominate Janet.
You can't nominate me, I'm not a planning
I
commission
can do
meeting.
second.
So Anna, I will nominate Anna to be the secretary.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Secretary of Defense. And the final thing will be adopting the rules of procedure dated July 8th, 2019. Make a
Actually, you
vote.
can do that by signatures,
Okay.
so
We'll
you
just-
should just pass that around and have people sign it as they come.
Perfect. Blue pen. We're gonna auction it off later. All right, I'll hang on to this.
We all have Scrabble handwriting, so.
Yeah, sure, Lisa.
Yeah.
Hang on to this until other members come, and then we'll have them sign it, or not. So that's the second item on our agenda. Third is continued discussion of uses in the aquifer protection overlay, and I know Christian is here to address that, so if you want to take the floor for a moment, that'd be fine.
Thank you. As you're aware, I've been coming to meetings now since May, or March, discussing the issue of self-storage as it relates to the MU2 district and also the aquifer protection zone.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So we're proposing that as conditional use in the mixed use too.
Yes.
Can you,
Yes, I acknowledge that. Yes, I thank you for responding to our information in that regard. I guess the issue before us this evening is regarding the perceived threat of self-storage to the aquifer protection area, B zone. We're requesting that self-storage be added to the conditional uses that are allowed in the aquifer protection B zone. There are 17 other uses. This is from in the information that I gave you at the last month's meeting. There are 17 uses in the aquifer protection B zone that are allowed as conditional uses. I could read the list if you wish, but that's one of the reasons why I gave the information in a written form. It includes things like light industry, automotive repair, transportation services, salvage yards, on-site wastewater disposal systems, or wastewater treatment facility. It's our contention that self-storage is less likely to cause environmental impact to the aquifer protection B zone than most of the items on this list. And we're just asking to be added to the list so that self-storage business might be considered in the APO-B, just like these other businesses are. The search that we've conducted, both at EPA level and state level, shows no history of hazardous waste storage in self-storage units throughout the country. So I guess the other item is the leases that are signed on the individual storage units prohibit storage of anything perishable or flammable, chemicals, paints, hazardous, noxious materials, foodstuffs, seeds. Seeds are legal material. And I have a statement here that Andy asked me to read that gives you some insight into his leasing procedure. He said, I meet every tenant and review with them the lease agreement, show them the space and how the locks work, and make it clear that no hazardous materials may be stored. The tenants sign and initial the lease when needed. I'm on site various times at all 3 locations, 7 days a week, 350 days a year. At my visits, I drive around all of the buildings inspecting the locks. I'm on a first name basis with many of my tenants. I see many tenants when they visit their units. Most units see little activity. Many tenants hand deliver their rent to me or at the drop box outside my office. I get to know most tenants by the time they check out and drop off their locks or stop to chat. It gives me great satisfaction to provide a much needed service of affordable storage and U-Haul rentals to the community. And then he asked, please visit uhaul.com and look up Manchester Restores It and read reviews of my customers and my customer service. He tries to provide all the excellent customer service. So I guess I'm restating what I've said previously, that in our research we find that the potential issues that were presented in an email from the town manager dated March 14th simply do not exist. Access to the units is easily, access to the units is guaranteed through the lease, so the lease notifies them that the owner has the right to enter the units at any time, and or they'll authorize police or fire personnel to enter the units at any time. So there is simply no threat to the APO from self-storage units, certainly no more threat than there would be from at least a dozen of the other businesses that are currently allowed as permitted uses. The other item here is that following the list of permitted uses is a list of performance standards that need to be met in order for a project to be approved. So not only do you have to meet the, it has to be considered a conditional use, but the performance standards need to be met. So there are still a lengthy list of specific conditions that apply to protecting the APO. So if that requires additional work on the part of an applicant, then that becomes part of the application process. So our simple request is to be added to the list of the other conditional uses that are considered in the APO2 or APOD.
So we did a little research on our own and found many articles. We haven't verified any of them by going to these locations, but storage of mercury and self-storage unit in San Diego. Atlanta man sentenced for storing hazardous waste in a self-storage facility. Self-storage owner discovers medical waste in units. Meth labs discovered in storage units. Endless stories about meth labs, actually. There's a lot of stories about meth labs. And so one of my questions is, does a typical self-storage unit owner of the business, do they have insurance against hazardous materials or contamination from units?
I'm not sure what insurance Andy carries at this time, but I've seen news reports where it's suggested it's suggested to owners to have that insurance if they feel it's necessary.
I guess when we had a meeting, I think it was 2 times ago, when we discussed this, and at the end of it, we said, I think literally, that we would base we understand that there's no cases of any self-storage units being, my understanding is that I had no issue with, if there's other self-storage facilities that have never had problems, then yeah, okay, I understand that. But based on the research we did, or I did, there were a lot of things that came up where there were, in fact, places that had hazardous materials stored in them. And it confirmed my kind of suspicion. So I have concerns about it happening in that position, in that area. We have allowed it as a conditional use in other areas. It's a permitted use in other areas. We're not shutting it down completely in town. It's just in an aquifer protection area. And on the planning commission, we have to consider all sides of it. And I think that's a risk reward, and the risk of having something happen based on a unit where you don't really have full control of it. There's no oversight, really. There's no one watching what's coming in and going out, nor are we going to have the police officer once a week go through and do a check of every unit to make sure that there's nothing in there. And so I still have concerns about it, and I think that there's other places where these facilities can go. We're not completely stopping it from going everywhere. It's just in that one area, and it's still permitted. He's still permitted to have his business where it is currently, and even expand it within his property. So that's my feel on it. And there's several articles out there that address that.
Can I ask what the source was of your
Internet?
What specific research source? Just a general Google search or a news archive?
General Google search, yes.
Just a general Google search?
And what we can do if it's an
Because I did the same thing, general Google search with a number of of keywords, hazardous waste and self-storage and contamination, and I found none of those things. So I'm
I'll be happy
just
to send you
curious.
the list of articles and you can review them yourself.
That would be helpful. Because I'm just not finding that information. Certainly, I can't discount that some things occur. There certainly is no, what you're telling me is that things have occurred, you're not telling me whether the contamination was recent. So just because somebody's doing something illegal in the storage unit doesn't necessarily mean it was a threat of contamination to the aquifer. So I think there's more to this than just whether or not there's a report of somebody having a meth lab in a storage unit somewhere in the country, or even 10 of them in the country. If it didn't pose a threat to an aquifer, then it didn't pose a threat to an aquifer. So I guess the implied hazard isn't necessarily a hazard if it didn't present itself as a hazard. So if it's illegal activity, it's illegal activity. It's not necessarily.
Well, I don't think that I'm going to sit here and wait till something happens and then say, okay, now let's react to it. That's my opinion.
Oh, no, I understand, and
So-
I serve on a planning commission myself, and I understand the thought process involved. So,
Jim, you can
well, I
ask this
guess
question.
my question is, why, is there going to be a review of the other things on that list, the other?
Yes, in fact,
Yeah, I
we
would
are,
like, yeah.
we're already talking about having
Because,
the automobile repair being taken off, and I think we're all in agreement
I
on
would
that.
say, yeah.
Salvage yard the same way, because.
And there's
Yeah,
some
and
other ones.
salvage, they're anything that can go for it. I mean, I think
Well,
golf
I think-
pesticides are no
Yes,
good. I mean,
no,
that's a
there you go.
danger. I don't, yeah, I would say, I don't want to interrupt, and I don't know what was said right before I walked in, but I would say that in reviewing everything, I think what struck me was that we were allowing too many things in that area overall, and I think loosening Zone B is not a good idea. I think anything related to protecting our aquifer should be much stricter, not adding areas of conditional use. So while I agree there may not be EPA findings, I think just as a general, anywhere where, yeah, I mean, you know, it may not be an aquifer hazard, but people put things in storage that shouldn't be there, and I think any sort of business industry that has any risk to the aquifer should be much stricter. We should be much stricter about, and I think we took the state's recommendations, but I think all of us, as we looked at it, said, oh, these aren't strict enough for
Well,
us.
I think you may be missing part of the state's point, and that is that the Aquifer Protection Area B is not an area of high risk. That's why they're allowing so many things on the list with a set of performance standards that enhances the protection measures.
I do understand that, but
Yeah.
but the fact that there is a zone, that the thought is you need your Zone A, Zone B, I think that we should be protective.
Okay. Are you aware that Zone A already includes 2 zones? So,
I mean, I just
yeah, I
feel
mean,
like we need to tighten down and relook at these and tighten down, not loosen up.
Well, I stopped short
around
in
the
my
aquifer.
research of going to the Aquifer Protection Report to see what it says, because the definition of the Aquifer Protection Zones is important, because the perceived threat by those various zones should enter into the discussion. If it's an area of minimal threat, then that should enter into the discussion and the assessment. Just the fact that it exists, it shouldn't necessarily be a total exclusion zone. So I guess that's why the state has a gradation of zones. So I guess before you take the list and say that nothing can take place that has any kind of risk whatsoever, maybe you want to look and see what that APOB really means from a scientific standpoint. I guess that's what I'm trying to hinge on. That the decision maybe should hinge on science rather than emotion and perceived threat.
There's no emotion behind this.
Well, perceived threats.
Yeah, perceived threat. I recall in the meetings that we had about the aquifer, when you were looking at changing zoning, that the state, because of our aquifer, the state, has urged the town to increase, to extend the sewer service throughout the aquifer, but it also suggested that it may at some point require expansion of the protected zones, and that, areas that are Zone B currently could become Zone A. That was something else that was, it's, if you read the, I can't remember what the Aquifer Protection Plan is called, that the state approves on a regular basis, that's one point that is made in that plan, and that was something that came up when we had these discussions two or so years ago in multiple meetings.
No, I did some research, and I found, there's something like 846,000 self-storage places in the U.S. It's a huge number. Places like Atlanta, there's 9 million people in the metropolitan area of Atlanta. It covers 13 counties. It's a huge city. I mean, Vermont has 600,000 people roughly in the whole state. So the chances of something going wrong in Atlanta, that's pretty high. If a case like that happening, it's like it's a better chance of it happening. But Vermont, especially Manchester, being such a small town, I mean, it's almost like a 1 billion chance of something happening with the size of our town. Something like that, where someone stores mercury or from a scientific lab, or makes a meth lab in a self-storage. I mean, because here in Vermont, there's so many woods, you can just make a meth lab in the woods. You don't need to go into, it's not like LA where there's no woods, no place to make a meth lab. So here, I doubt it would happen. I mean, I personally don't feel that someone would resort to that in a self-storage place, especially I've been over there with him, overlooking all the cars that go in and out and what happens. Now, I feel like if we were to allow this, we would have to be able him to expand and build more self-storage. We should require that he have cameras installed, things like that, to oversee what's going in and out, who's going in and out. Just as a safety precaution, because a friend of mine owns self-storage places in Atlanta, and he has cameras everywhere. Everything's recorded 24 hours a day, surveillance. And that lets him keep an eye on what's going in and out of the building and who's doing what. So, here, this Manchester being such a, it's Mayberry almost. It's a small town. It's quiet. I just can't see an event like that happening here. Like I said, the automotive, the golf courses, those are a bigger worry to me. With pesticides and gasoline being poured on the ground, and then the possibility someone may do something at the self-storage. As I said, that just seems like a slim chance, really slim chance. So that's my thought of it. So just wanted to say that.
Well, the risk reward in my mind is the risk may be low, but the damage that can be done is really high, and in my opinion. And if you think one person's life is not important, then okay, yeah, only one person might get sick or something like that. But I don't know. I feel like, my opinion, we're allowing it in other areas. It's still conditional use in the area that it's in, and there's plenty of other areas where it can go. So I just feel like it's the safe choice, and I'm going to default to safety in my position, because I don't want to wake up one day and have anything be negative from decisions that we've made. And I'm going to default to that. And it's just the unintended consequences. Sometimes they can be someone getting upset because they don't like the color of someone's house, and other times unintended consequences can be someone getting sick because they had bad drinking water, and that's where I'm at. And it's fine. We can vote on it, and if this moves forward, it's not the last opportunity anyway, so we're gonna have to have a hearing. And we're gonna have to go to the select board, they're gonna have a hearing, so there's gonna be plenty of opportunities for this. My personal request would be, I don't wanna just keep battling this as it moves forward. If there's new information or new data that needs to get applied to it or presented, then that's fine. And I'd be happy to hear it, but up until this point, I think we just keep hearing the same argument, which I think is a good argument, but it's just not enough to convince me personally. And,
Okay. Well, the delay to tonight was because I wasn't included in the agenda for the last meeting, so.
well, that was a public hearing, so that wasn't the forum for it, yeah.
No, I guess my presentation is done, and I would welcome you to make an official decision on it if that's the way, what you want to do, just so that, we know how to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. James?
Thanks, Greg. Is there any evidence that the self-storage units pose any more risk than any other use that's currently there, or really any other use in the town? I mean, for example, is there any evidence that someone's more likely to set up a meth lab or store mercury in a self-storage unit than their house or their garage?
I have no idea.
So then how could we make a decision if we don't know? I mean, we're making decisions saying that
They haven't made a decision because they haven't done all the work on this yet. So they haven't made
Yeah,
a
I think
decision
what this
yet.
has brought up to me is that we need to look at everything allowed in Zone B and we need to go over it. That's what when you brought this to our attention, some of the other things that do have conditional use. My big thing looking through the list was there's too much going on in Zone B and we need to really look at that. We need to relook at that whole section and figure it out. And then see where that falls out. But that's what this has brought up for me.
I was listening to Greg, and Greg made a decision, so I was just asking Greg.
No, as a body, they haven't made a decision.
I know that.
Okay.
I'm aware of that. Yeah. My point is that people do bad things. People do bad things everywhere, in their house, their garage, in the basement of their business, in a warehouse, in a gas station, perhaps even in a self-storage unit. But based upon real evidence that we have, is there any likelihood that this is going to happen in the self-storage unit more than anywhere else in our town? The answer is no, because there's not. All we have is an email from the town manager that had no basis whatsoever. It was just a guess. And in fact, the town manager's email was wrong. Andy Tarantino has immediate access to his storage units for himself and for any town or state official. So actually, I think it's actually even more safe because you would need a warrant to get into someone's house or a business. But the self-storage unit has written into the lease that you can get immediate access if there ever were a problem.
How would you know? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have one question just about that, in that it says where's the wording? Because I was.
On that email from John?
No. On the lease. It says, yeah, when it says, I thought it said something about, authorized people, it says, comply with any requirements in any form at any time applicable to the premises or any part thereof by any government authority having jurisdiction over the premises. So is there, for the tenants, is there an explanation of what that is? Like what jurisdiction, what governmental authority having jurisdiction over the premises? That sounds like a warrant. So I'm just curious about the wording.
I guarantee it's not a warrant, it's just a lease.
Do they explain that to the tenant? Because I'm just curious, just because when I read governmental authority having jurisdiction, I'm thinking, well, if they have, in order to have jurisdiction, they must have cause or. something like that in
No,
order to go in.
there's no language in that even suggests that there needs to be cause. That's a contract between the owner,
And the tenant,
right,
yeah.
which actually
Yeah.
is helpful to protecting the land and the aquifer more than if there wasn't a contract. Because that contract puts the tenant on notice. By renting this, you're agreeing that at any time, the owner and the governmental agency can get access.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying, I'm just saying the wording is confusing because because it says any government authority having jurisdiction over the premises, because I'm just saying as a layperson, I'm not a lawyer, I read that and I say, oh, well, if they have a warrant or probable cause, they can come in, but my stuff is out of privacy otherwise.
There's no
Well,
warrant required.
that basically identifies that it's the authority involved, which in this case, where we're sitting right here, is the Manchester Police Department, the Vermont State Police, and any federal authorities. So it's basically any authority.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, I'm just saying as a layperson, how I read that.
At this point, they just can't come in and
But
go in
it-
every unit.
And if they can, do they
The
define
order is
that somewhere?
authorized to let them
Wait.
into the unit. That's
For the
what it is.
minutes, please, can we slow down?
Oh, I'm sorry,
So
I'm sorry.
Tina is asking, I thought you were asking, is that explained?
Yeah, that's what I'm
To a
asking,
tenant.
to a tenant, because
What-
that doesn't explain
What
that.
that means.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Because as a layperson, I read it one way. Is there something that the landlord explains what that means, that they have, and that for any reason, he can go in at any time? Because that isn't clear in the contract. That's all I'm asking, if there is a place where that is explained.
Right, contracts are generally written in legalese, which allows flexibility in all situations. So
Well,
it may
I
not make sense to
understand.
you immediately, but it's there for a specific reason so that it'll apply.
I understand everything you're saying, but that doesn't.
I think his answer, Tina, is that it's up to the tenant to get legal advice.
To get
as
a
what that
lawyer
means.
before they go through this.
I did wait.
And then add a
Okay,
codicil.
don't put words in my mouth.
Okay, well, I mean,
I-
No,
that's,
but that's the way you're saying that. It sounds like I need my lawyer to add a codicil that
No,
explains
I
that
haven't had a
there's free
chance to, I haven't had a
access.
chance to explain myself because I've been interrupted twice. Maybe I continue.
Oh, yeah, please.
So there is no warrant requirement, it's not in there. It's not a situation where there would be a warrant because the lease says that the owner and the officials can go in whenever they need to.
What is,
It's as simple as that. There's no explanation required.
but government authority having jurisdiction over the premises is a confusing state, it's just a confusing.
So this board has jurisdiction over anything, any storage unit in the town of Manchester as far as planning. The zoning office would have jurisdiction, the taxing authorities would, the police would.
I would think that we can't just walk over there and say, I'm on the planning commission, open up your storage unit, and I want to see what's in there.
Yeah, I don't think
I
that's
don't think that
right.
would, that is
I mean, as a
feasible.
tenant, that would seem very odd.
So, and I think also the point of saying, oh, well, you can access it whenever you want, I don't think that that's a legitimate argument to help stop someone from doing something, because you're not going to know that something is wrong until it's wrong.
Right, again, we're talking about this fictitious thing that
That's
might
what we do in
happen.
the planning commission, we talk about fictitious things about like, what if the building is 45 feet tall, how many people are gonna die because the fire truck can't get to the window?
So
And
going
that's
back
how
to
we
my
decide
original
those things.
question, what other use in this town is less likely for these possible problems to happen in?
Well, we already talked about excluding auto repair from there, which is in there currently. So we're, I think, all in agreement that we're gonna take that off the list too.
Yeah.
There's 17 uses. Which one is, other than where you might store snow, but there can be chemicals in snow
Right.
that would spread on the road, what of those 17 uses would be less likely for these things to
Do you
happen?
wanna go over the list? Let's go over the list right now.
I mean, you haven't done that research
I
yet.
know, we haven't done, I
We can look at it
can
right
see
now real
just
quick,
Right.
and at least get an eyeball for
This-
what we're talking about, since it's
Like,
being focused on.
things I would like to look into on the list would
What page
be,
is it on?
well, I might have an old version, mine's on 27, but I don't know if I have the up to date. I have an old version. It's so I may not even have
Close.
the entire thing.
You're good.
So just like with a really quick perusal of it, the ones that stood out to me were golf course, pesticide, herbicide, fungicide applications, automobile repair, salvage yard, contract, well, not contract, salvage yard. So
That said though,
those four just jumped that I want to look into.
they do as well, but my comment on that would be one of the reasons why that almost feels like it would be more acceptable because those are all regulated uses.
But I'm
So,
saying, like,
But in any event, I agree with you.
those are the ones I would want
Yeah.
to take a deeper look at right off the top of my head.
Yep.
Without more, there may be others, but those struck me.
Can you tell me what those are again, please?
So, yeah, golf course,
So that's number
that's
2.
number 2,
Number 3,
number 5. and
What's number 3?
3 is the pesticide, herbicide, fungicide applications.
Someone could store
5 is
hazardous
the
chemicals at any one of
automobile
these
repair,
places.
and 12 is the salvage.
Sorry, what was 5?
Oh, sorry, automobile
And what was the last one?
repair, salvage yard. Oh, no, I'm not saying I gave a complete, I'm just saying those are the ones that I would want to look at. Off the top of my head.
Is it possible that someone could build a meth lab in a funeral home? Yes. Or
Well-
someone could store mercury at a funeral home?
Oh, I'm not saying that we have perfect answers to anything. I'm saying that this is brought up that we need to look a little more deeply into some of these things. I mean, they're dead bodies in funeral homes and they found dead bodies in storage units. So, I mean, it is what it is. March in Georgia, actually.
My
He
point
found
is
2
that
bodies.
nowhere is exempt from potential.
No,
Not even our,
understood.
nowhere. So,
Totally understood.
so how do we regulate it? I think Mr. Ward presented a very good argument. That
He
the
did,
incidences
but
are extremely low, and with Mr. Tarantino's facility is open 24/7 with lights, and if cameras were installed, I mean, that would give added protection to a situation that's been exemplary. There's been no problems there. But there are ways to deal with this to bring more assurances for people like yourself who are concerned that something could go wrong.
Oh, yeah, that's why we need to dig in a little. I mean, that's why we need to review, because we hadn't been looking at this zone B until Christian came and talked to us about this. So that made us all take another look at it and say, oh, we should look at this more closely. And part of it is, it's a huge document, and it's been dealing with bits, it was imperfect, and we knew that, and so we've been trying to tweak and work on it on a regular basis, and relook at things, and look at them more deeply, and make new decisions if they make sense. And this is now one that I think that's what we need to do.
And perhaps if there's a way you guys can come up with some sort of ideas to help address Greg's concerns, to maybe, find ways to alleviate the fear. I'm not sure, no ideas really how to do that, but I mean, that might help the case.
So I had contemplated bringing a hydrogeologist with me because hydrogeology is really at the key of why the APO even exists. And so hydrogeology is the science of protecting aquifers. And that person could give you an insight into the rationale behind the APO process and details on how it was
The dangers
derived.
posed by each one of them.
I guess the other thing I want to add is if you're going to discuss the list of 17, or 17 and 19, you really want to read through the performance standards on page 29 very closely, because the reason there are so many things on that list for APOB is because of the performance standards. They are, it's a list of 11 things that you need to comply with
Yes.
in order to exist in the APOB. So there are,
Yes, I did.
there's a very stringent list of things that need to be applied in those cases. And that's why there's so many things on the list, because if you can meet everything on this list of 11 performance standards, the risk is greatly reduced. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying, if you allow self-storage, the what-ifs go away if you apply the performance standards. Because the performance standards are just as real for every use. And they have great value of protection, even to the point of forcing applicants to underdrain or even put a liner in things, if that's what it's going to take in order to meet these things. So you're not talking about just any self-storage or just any car repair business or just any storage facility. They need to comply with these performance standards, which are very strict. If they can't do that, then they can't get a permit. But if they can do that, then they're no longer a threat to the APLP. That's the whole point of the performance standards, and it allows you to have that flexibility of the long list. I'm just saying that self-storage belongs on the list because if it meets the performance standards, it's less of a threat than most of the things on the list already. So please read the performance standards before you go through the list and say, well, I can't have that on there, I can't have that on there. Because if it applies, if it meets the performance standards, the state is saying that you can protect your aquifer and still have use.
Yeah, no, totally understood. And the other thing I'd like to get though, in going through this is, as Janet said, if the state recommended that there may be a chance that we would need to expand Zone A, I would like to know where that expansion would be, how much that if they think that's what would need to happen, if they can foresee that that's a possibility, I'd like to know what their thought is on how Zone A would expand, where, for how much.
The amount of the
So-
water you extract from the well.
But I
You go
think.
to a certain threshold in the APO today.
Yes, but so I'd like to know what their thought is on where that potential new boundary could be, because it could behoove us to act on that and as looking forward, rather than having to catch up later if the state came and said, you really need to expand this now, and if, so it could behoove us to do that and then take the expanded Zone A and then look at what B would be and where it would be and all of that for what would then need to fit those standards,
Yes,
you know?
I
So that
fully
seems-
agree.
Yeah,
I
so
fully
that
agree.
seems like would be a
My
really
stance is
thought for
not
us.
to expect something that self-storage does not deserve. I'm just saying,
Oh.
I'm looking for inclusion in a list of all the other things that are heavily regulated.
Mhm.
So I believe in the regulation and the protection of the aquifer as a paramount cause here.
Yeah.
But I'm just, my case is that it's no more a threat than any other things on the list, if it's properly regulated, just like all those other uses would be. And we're welcoming the regulation, we just want a chance.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I would ask you to not make any decisions, in this case, based on fear. Let's base it on facts and evidence. We get
And,
to regulate our own homes as to what we want in them and what we don't want and the kind of security we have. That's where our jurisdiction ends as individuals, but you're a public governing body.
yeah.
So it has to be in a way that protects everyone, but that is fair across the board.
Oh, yeah.
So our
But we also
fear,
have to look at the future, like I said, with what could be our potential with Zone A expansion, all that. So but that's, I mean, I think that is our job, is to look towards the future and do our best. We won't do everything right, obviously, but do our best to move things in the right direction to keep this town, keep everything protected and safe and working well and all that, so. But yeah, I think you're right, it's not an emotional thing, it's just a, look at safety, I mean, and I don't mean safety of a self-storage unit so much as I mean safety of the aquifer, more than anything, and how much of an expansion we may at some point need to do and where that would be. And then we'll be able to see where Zone B is and what makes sense if we look at everything together.
Well, at this point, this is something that could be a nickel holding up a dollar. So I would recommend that we not change anything with regards to the Aquifer Protection Overlay District and move forward without changing this at all, so that we can at least get the other welcomed changes through. And I don't want this to be something that's going to delay the other important changes that need to be made. And that would be my thought on right now, would be say, okay, let's eliminate any changes to the Aquifer Protection Overlay District and just move forward with the other items.
Until we get more.
Until we can do all the research we need to do and get all the facts and the hydrogeologists and all the experts to weigh in on this. And maybe at the end of it, we'll say, no, you're right. If we do need to allow all those uses, and it's not as much of an impact as we suspected.
So that would mean, well, so are you saying, so you're just talking about the APO? So that would mean there would be no change right now. We wouldn't put this in among those listed uses.
And have it on a separate track.
But but you're fine with adding self-storage to MU2?
As conditional.
As a conditional use, okay.
Point of clarification, I know there's been no vote, but are you considering deferring a decision on Mr. Tarantino's and Chris's request, or denying it? And keep it?
Deferring it,
Deferring.
so we
Just
can
deferring it.
So we can
Yes.
learn.
fully understand it. And, which means, because we're trying to make other updates to the ordinance as well, and then this is gonna hold those things up. So I'm saying we take this on a separate track, where we can get more information, and it'll be further down the line when the actual decision is made. And then it can be handled as its own item that will not, in the end, ultimately, let's say that we agree here to keep it as a prohibited use in the APO. Then it gets to the select board, and the select board says, no, we're gonna make it a permitted use. Then it has to come back to us, and all those other changes that we're trying to make that are changing red to blue and things like that are gonna be delayed. So at least we can separate the two, since this is an important subject, and make it go through on a separate track. That's my recommendation.
That's clear now. It sounds like it's a
That's-
deferral
yeah,
until a
that's
later
right,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, so there'll be
Yeah,
plenty
definitely.
more opportunities to come back and revisit
Yeah.
this, but you're looking at the big picture as well.
Yes.
Okay.
The decision is simply not to add it at this time.
Correct.
So great.
But we are going to make it, in the mixed use two, a conditional use, which is more lenient than it is currently. So, is there any other comment on that? I would like to make one comment. The planning commission does support small business. Small businesses are important to us, and we don't make decisions based on emotion. We make them based on what we think is the best decision. So to imply or literally say that we want to shut down small business is inaccurate and unfair and untrue. Is there anything else on this subject? All right, we'll move forward on to consideration other drafted amendments to the ordinance. We have 15 minutes on it. Is there a list that you'd like to go over?
No. Just that we haven't gotten there yet. So I have this document, and it has, if you have copies of it, and it has, all the suggested changes in red and all the strike out, language that we want to remove and strike out. And I just haven't been able to get to the last few revisions based on our last meetings. There's too much permitting and development review to be done. So I don't know when I'll get it, but
We need 3 Janets.
I know.
Okay, so let's make would it help to make a goal of when we want to have all of the initial draft of the,
well, it helps to have deferred this.
Yes.
Because this is sort of
Right.
a static into it.
so what if we said our next meeting, we will have a current document of the suggested changes, and we can review it and discuss all of those things.
I will send it to you ahead of time.
Is that,
Yes.
is that doable?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to rush it or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we would have been there by now.
Right.
but- so, Just too much to do.
No, I understand.
I'm still waiting on your minutes.
So we can hopefully get a updated ordinance, draft ordinance sent out before next one. And if we do, then we can add it as an agenda item to that. And then we can review that. That would be helpful.
So the next meeting,
When is the next meeting?
is the
12th. It's the second Monday in August.
Twelfth.
Yes.
We'll try to tackle that on August 12th.
And then we need to do the same thing for the energy plan.
Right.
I haven't had time to make that revision.
Okay.
So same thing.
Sure. So we can review that at our next meeting, and then with maybe the goal of having the energy plan, or the new hearing in September.
September. It should be September 9th.
Yep.
Well, no, so, I need 30 days, I need 30 days to warn it, so it'll probably be,
October
October,
14th.
because, yeah.
That's Columbus Day.
So some other October
Maybe
Monday.
we can do it on the 7th.
Yep.
We can do it earlier, that's it.
Yeah.
That sound okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So we could maybe have a hearing for both on October.
Yeah, that'd be great.
7th.
October 7th.
Okay.
Any other business? Thank you all very much for your input on this, and continue to research it, and everyone's opinion is important, so. I think we're gonna have to, I'm gonna pull up these articles and do a little digging on what I have, and I'll consolidate that and do a little fact checking on it. It'd be nice,
I will say the hydrogeologist idea is a pretty good idea.
yeah, so it'd be nice to know if
Sorry.
I'm sorry, too many things.
we have access to a hydrogeologist that would be
So
able
we
to.
have an aquifer protection plan, and it is drafted by hydrogeologists, and so we can refer to the aquifer protection plan. It might even have the answer to Tina's question about where geographically
It would expand,
would
so
that
they
be expanded. I don't know. And we should probably talk to whoever the state regulators are about aquifer protection zones and whatnot. So,
Is there a way that we can handle some of that, so it's not an additional thing on your
Sure.
plate?
Yeah.
Please do.
So, can
So-
you give me the name, and I'll start
I mean, I can get you probably John would be the point person, he and Chrissy Haskins, our engineer, are in charge of, updating that aquifer protection plan. I know that when Dave Sheldon was superintendent, he was involved as well, so maybe Eric Severance too, when he's superintendent. They're the ones who are involved in getting that plan.
Okay. Maybe we could have someone at our next meeting to be able to ask questions to, and then someone, that'll work out well.
Yeah, I would like to make it as airtight as possible, so there's no chance of a legal case coming against the town for something like this. If we can just really nail it down, that would be great. If we, present our case to everyone.
Well, it may change my mind. He may come in and say, no, even if you spill a
Or it
50
might-
gallon barrel of oil up there, it's not going to
It might change my mind, so. it might
Well,
be the other
actually,
direction, so.
I don't think so. They're not gonna say that, because, and see, that's one of the things about saying, well, if they meet these performance standards, yeah, they can say they're gonna meet those performance standards, but who's gonna follow up? Are you gonna have Eric Severance knocking on the door to find out whether all of these kinds of uses,
I know for a
so that's
fact.
the other thing,
But we're-
unless you have staff that are available to follow up on all of these performance standards, you probably shouldn't, you can't rely on, it's sort of like,
But the argument's pretty strong to say like, well, what about someone's garage at their own house? They shouldn't allow houses.
well, but see, every year, the part of that aquifer protection plan is that, it used to be Dave Sheldon, now it's probably Eric, they have to send a letter to the landowners and remind them, you can't do any of these things because you're in an aquifer protection area. So there are some, there's some follow-up, but, on these bigger, riskier kinds of uses, at a single-family home, I mean, how much of a threat is that compared to
Auto
a
garage.
commercial? Yeah. Just because the guy that is repairing cars there right now says, yeah, I never throw things down,
They get gas on the ground all the
don't
time.
throw, I don't do any of that.
It's probably not, the golf course can see those.
Well, but they are, it's true, as Greg says, those are regulated. Golf courses are regulated. Their pesticide applications are regulated by the state. But, for activities that aren't, yeah.
I'm not a pessimist. It's funny, I just think about the golf courses and you look at them compared to everything else, like, you may be regulated, but that can be good. It can't be good.
There's a lot of Roundup being
It
sprayed.
just can't,
Well, maybe
yeah,
it's
it
also
goes
the
right
same
into
water
groundwater.
and
And then there's also is Roundup safe for humans or not? We don't really know.
We do, actually.
We know it's not.
And we used to not look at, what's the chemical class down in Bennington that was the big problem?
Oh, the PFO.
PFAS.
Yeah.
Now,
We know
everybody's
they're
looking
at.
at it.
Right.
So,
So, yeah, those are, yeah.
so.
Regulated does not
So
necessarily
what you were
mean
saying
safe.
about, why not err on the side of caution? It's our aquifer, and that's what,
It's our water.
and that's
Yeah,
what
it's
the
our
people
water.
who came to those hearings, were so concerned about.
Yeah, they were very passionate.
Dick
I was
Smith,
gonna say.
Orland Campbell, Mike Powers, Doug Kilburn, all kinds of people that were involved in trying to find that aquifer and how difficult it was to find. And
Yeah.
how protective we need to be of it. So,
Also, we could revisit.
yeah, maybe a 1 in a million chance, but if that million chance happens, it destroys the town aquifer.
I mean, if our river gets polluted in the fish guy, that's going to hurt a lot of business in town. So that kind of stuff is important, The Orbis won't be very happy if something happens to the trout.
Oh, yeah, the water's, it's like seriously important. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hyper protect it rather
Well, so
than.
let's look at the list of 17.
Well, that's what I
Make it a
think,
list
yeah.
of 10 or whatever it needs to be, and consider everything that.
Every
I
Everything
definitely would
risk
like
that
to
we're
see
concerned
the
about.
Zone A expansion where that should be, because I really would would love to just protect it now.
So we'll try to get,
Yeah,
So-
I'm with that.
So can
I can
Tina or Greg follow up with John on that?
Yeah, I totally
In
will.
getting that
I will
information?
absolutely
Okay,
get
so
that.
Tina is going to follow up.
Yeah.
okay. Great. Thank you. Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Absolutely.
Seconded by
Tina.
Tina, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
What time?
It is 8:04, exactly 1 hour. Wonderful.